I work with hypertension and HIV treatment. So I received another invitation to work at the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. It's a big institute of research.
It's really, really interesting to hear this. I don't know if you can fully appreciate this because I'm coming from the other side of the fence here, but I cannot believe that there is a universal IRB system.
We are trying to reestablish this level of information. For them, we need to do more public marketing.
This is Trial and Error, where we dive deep into the world of clinical trials, uncovering the challenges, breakthroughs, and stories behind the scenes. Clinical trials are the backbone of advancing medical care, yet the administrative hurdles of getting sites started up and getting patients through the door often slows down progress.
Alessandro Nascimento currently serves as the head director of clinical operations and commercial development at CIDP. In this role, he focuses on expanding commercial activities in early phase dermatology and cosmetic studies. With a strong background in clinical operations, Alessandro has recently transitioned into business development. This move has given him a unique perspective on the industry. He saw an opportunity to address a common challenge, the gap between clinical operations and sponsor understanding of study requirements. In his current position, Alessandro works to improve communication between the operational side of clinical trials and the commercial interests of sponsors. He helps explain the complexities of running effective studies, particularly as it relates to Brazilian studies, which must take into account the unique legal and ethno-demographic differences of the country. Prior to CIDP, Alessandro operated at the site level across a variety of very large, critical STI studies, where he gained extensive industry experience following his academic history studying in the cardiovascular space. And with that, I welcome Alessandro to Trial and Error.
The views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the speakers and do not necessarily reflect the views or positions of any entities they represent.
All right. Hey, Alessandro, it's so nice to see you again. How are you doing?
Hi, nice to see you again too. I'm fine. And you?
Doing all right. So I'm really excited to have you on today. I think that a lot of people who are probably listening have quite a bit of experience running clinical research studies in the United States or in Europe. But I think one thing that's really interesting is the concept of running clinical research in other countries, including LATAM and Africa. I know that you are currently the head of clinical operations running clinical research in Brazil. So I thought maybe today we could talk a little bit about that. But before that, I like to ask everyone this, how did you end up getting into clinical research? I always find this is a super interesting background.
I'm pharmacist. I have graduating a long time. And then I just came to do my master's degree in preclinical research. So I work with animals to test molecule for hypertension and microcirculation effects. So then I started my PhD with the same molecule. So I work with laboratory in France. They produce these molecules. So I started to work with them at my PhD in Strasbourg. And then I started to touch clinical research because they have this translational study. We started with rats and animals to see the effects of this antihypertensive metabolic syndrome and hypertension in diabetes. And then after my PhD, I received an invitation to work in my postdoc in Avignon, where I worked with obese adolescents that were supplemented with vitamin D. And we worked with microcirculation loss. And then I received another invitation to do my postdoc in Brazil with a group in the National Institute of Cardiology, still in hypertension. But this time, I really focus human studies because it's difficult to have this translational period because you want to publish, you want to understand the molecule, but you also want to see the effect in the target population. It was really interesting for me, this change. And then I work with hypertension and HIV treatment. So I started a new project to see the effects of the antiretroviral treatment at the cardiovascular system. So I received another invitation to work at the Oswaldo Cruz Foundation. It's a big institute of research. And I started for working with them for the NIH projects to start with a vaccine that was in phase 3 to avoid HIV infection. So during this period, I really learned how to do clinical research for industry and for pharmaceutical requirements in Brazil, all the regulatory demands. And then I received another request or proposition because during the HIV vaccine period, we had the pandemic, the COVID pandemic, and it was really, we need to hold on to the study, the vaccine for HIV. And then it started for the single dose COVID vaccines. It was stress, but at the end, the satisfaction of being in the group that worked to reestablish the world economic and normal life, it was really interesting. So after the pandemic, I returned to HIV, but then I received another request and proposition to work with cosmetics. It really changed my life because at the beginning I didn't understood why cosmetic. I don't have experience. But in scientific field, you understand that you just need to focus and to learn, and then you're going to be someone that can help to produce more data, to produce more information about the topic. But I understood that they were really interested not in my background in HIV, hypertension, but they were interested in my background for clinical research in Brazil. All the regulatory aspect, the population aspect. And so I have started this new background in cosmetics, but also, as we have discussed, I'm not only clinical operations now. I have received another task for business development. And it was really interesting because we can talk this later, but doing this dual position, because dual test, because you need to sell now, because I'm in the corporate, in the business, and not as I was working for the public health. Now I need to sell, to develop commercial business for the industry, but also I need to understand how we work to do the project in cosmetics. That's where I'm now. I'm with cosmetics, clinical research, but basically doing business for clinical research in Brazil.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I think having the background of both the clinical side and now being in BD for clinical research in Brazil kind of puts you in a really good position to answer the following question, which is why Brazil for clinical research?
Yeah. First, you need to understand which kind of research you're going to follow. Because now I know cosmetics. Cosmetics in Brazil is something that really works. I know that we have a lot of information about Brazilian understanding of beauty and the importance, since I'm in Rio de Janeiro also, we need to be aligned with all the world requests for cosmetics. For example, new SPF that control oily for new products for hair to protect them for sodium salt at the beach, at the swimming pool. So for cosmetics is something that's really growing in Brazil. If you want to do some study that requires different kind of phototypes, for example, phototypes 2 to 5 is the most common in Rio because we have a big diversity here. For the phototype 1, this is the most important because you need to understand that the population in Brazil is big, but it's really different because in the south, where we were more colonized by the European, we can find phototype 1 most commonly. In the north, you are going to find more African population. So phototypes higher than 3, 4, and 5. So this is the resume for cosmetics, for example, and different kind of type of hair. So we have this population and a population that really wants to participate. Because when we talk about pharmaceutical industry and clinical research for drugs and different treatment, we are talking about a population that does not want to participate. They need the retention, the adherence is easier when we talk about cosmetics, because if you don't see any different in the appearance, the volunteers can left this study. But in pharmaceutical and clinical trials for drugs, treatment, and different technologies, the volunteers want to participate. It's different. We just need to understand which kind of population we are going to work. Is for cancer, is for any HIV, like infection disease or metabolic syndrome. So we need just to find the good source of these volunteers. But when we talk about Brazil also, in Brazil, we cannot pay for their participation. So we just need to reimburse them for the transportation and food because they need to eat. Sometimes it takes too much time at the CROs, at the laboratories. So we need to to be sure that they will be reimbursed for all the expense they have.
Right. So it sounds like one of the primary benefits of working in Brazil is you have a lot of genetic diversity, and you also have like a lot of diversity around kind of phototypes, or, what we're calling skin types. So for at least cosmetic and dermatological study, you can essentially capture a very large percentage of the population that you want to study in kind of a single country. So it sounds like the benefit is genetic diversity, right? Are there downsides to that as well, like having a lot of diversity when you're running the studies?
That's why sometimes the industry looks for different sites for testing in Brazil, because as we know, the food they take is different from the Northwest, from in the South. The sun exposure, the climate can change, because in the South we can have snow in the South. In Brazil, it's not so common, but it's cold. And in the Northwest, it's more hot. So we need to understand if this kind of alteration can also affect the stud. Genetically, yes, we have a lot of information in Brazil. So with any study that is running in Brazil in these different areas, we can be sure that we are testing most different kind of metabolism, most kind of difference in the pathophysiology also, because we don't know, for example, in cancer, we don't know the etiology sometimes, because we have a lot of facts acting for the growing of the disease. So if we test in different kind of, in the same kind of cancer, but in different region, we can also measure the difference of a drug absorption, a drug metabolism, because they are exposed to different kind of food and drinking. That's what comes in my mind now. I know that we have a lot of difference in for example, we don't have Asiatics a lot in Brazil. So if you want to test in this population, yes, we need to go to Asia or another country that has this population more frequently. But like example, in São Paulo, we have a big community for Asiatics. So if you need to test to approve this drug in Asia, you are going to need to understand better, because this is a community that's really more close to test. So you need to understand this kind of specificity also in this population.
Got it. So we were just talking about how you can get a lot of diversity when testing in Brazil.
Yes.
And I think that's very powerful. Are there specific kinds of studies or therapeutic areas that you find are particularly good for running in Brazil? So you had mentioned something about cosmetic, but are there other areas?
Yeah. When I started to work with HIV, I saw a big population that really needs to take advantage of the clinical research to access these different drug technology, different drugs that has been growing and has been developed for this last of years. And this population, for example, the transgender population, they are really want to participate because they have a risk increased for HIV or other STIs infection. So it's understanding this population and their needs really important, because when we do a study for them, we don't just need to give them the information, but we need to give them all the treatment. For example, they sometimes cannot go out during the day. You need to understand because how the population will take this opportunity to access the health. So we go to the HIV and different infectious disease, but you need to understand the other aspect of this population, because sometimes they don't have all the vaccinations, for example. They don't have a good diet. So if you want to work with them, we have a big community in Brazil and participates a lot in this study that would facilitate the HIV studies in Brazil. So if you want also another population for cancer, you can look for the big center that we have, for example, in Rio, Inca. This population is really big and they want to have access to new technologies. So if you understand this and to do some discussion with the sites and have more information about this population to understand how could you test your drug or test your new technology in Brazil, for example. So we need to understand this with clarity, because sometimes this can change a lot adherence and the retention in a study with different kind of targets.
So it sounds like Brazil has perhaps higher populations of at-risk populations, especially target populations, for STI studies, is what it sounds like. Why is that the case? Is there something unique about Brazil that leads to a higher population of at-risk or transgender populations?
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't know how the other countries see Brazil, but we know that we have a lot of, we are sexually open. For example, the carnival that we sell in the world, like event. Yes, it's interesting because in Brazil we have advanced for new aspect of life. So we understand that we can use condom, for example, but we know also that the old population today that use, for example, sildenafil or different drugs has helped them to restart their sexual life. This population were not familiar with condom. And we have seen a lot of numbers increasing of HIV or STI in this population because they restart the sexual life. And then, but this population in Brazil, we can talk about. We start talking about sexual disease, not sexual disease, but some infectious disease that were transmitted sexually. And we are really open to receive this kind of information because even the youngest. And the problem is today, I don't know if it's just in Brazil, because the youngest people, they are not afraid of HIV like we were in the past, because we don't see anyone that is dying of HIV or SIDA or AIDS. So it's interesting that this population, when we explain to their fathers, to their parents, they say, no, I need to explain to my son how they can protect themselves. We know that Carnival in Brazil is really now because people are open to do new relations, and is the moment that we do a lot of recruitment for testing. It's something that's really interesting for this population in Brazil.
Got it. So as a population, Brazil is more sexually open, both in the acts of sex as well as the desire to speak about it publicly, right? And so
Yes.
as a culture, they're more open to it. And so then you have the access to patient populations who are just more willing to talk about their experiences. At the same time, their engagement might also be a little bit higher than other countries, which unfortunately has the negative side effect of meaning you have a large population who are more open to sex later on in life, who are having it, but didn't have maybe the sexual education
Yes.
or the kind of cultural fears, taboo that might prevent it. And therefore, there's maybe a bit of a higher risk exposure for STIs. And so the population is a better or more interesting one to study from that perspective. I guess for
Exactly.
sponsors out there who are doing any kind of STI studies, that sounds like a great
Yes.
place to focus your time and attention on a population that sounds like they really need it. I think one thing we were talking about earlier was also vaccine studies. So there's something
Yes.
particular about Brazil and vaccines?
Yes, the population in Brazil, they understand the need of vaccine, because at the beginning, I know that Fiocruz is the one that's most common laboratory in Brazil. It's a big one located in different regions. They are they started in Rio de Janeiro with a vaccine objective. In Brazil, when we talked in the 80s, I think in 70s and 80s, they started to do this to inform the population the importance of that. So we have distinguished different negotiated diseases that were not common in other countries, but in Brazil we started because we have started this. I know that, and I remember my father, my mother taking me to take the vaccines. This generation has avoided different kind of disease, but now we have saw some disease that trying to
Make a
return.
comeback? A
Yes.
resurgence?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we are trying to reestablish this level of information, because we have a lot of fake news about the vaccination. I think we have now. So for them, we need to do more public marketing, public publicity in Brazil, and it works to avoid the comeback of different diseases. But Brazilian population is now that they accept and they understand the importance of being vaccinated, not just for them, but for the community.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense, right? Because you're talking about a country that not only has more exposure to infectious diseases due to the climate, right, and the,
Yes.
large,
Yes.
biodiversity that you're basically living
Yes.
adjacent to, but yeah, also the bunch of other factors. So that makes a lot of sense. So we talked a little bit about Brazil from the perspective of the population. I know that there are some differences that are unique on the regulatory body side. How is the Brazilian kind of overarching
Yeah.
regulatory body different from other countries?
Yes, for us, we have the CEP-CONEP system. It's interesting for any industry that wants to work in Brazil to understand the regulatory aspect. We have two different levels. We have the local level that is represented by the local ethical committee, is the CEP, and we have the national CEP, is the CONEP. When we want to do a study in Brazil, we need to submit all the documents, the ICF, the protocol, the questionnaire, any documents related to the drug we are testing, the device we are testing, and also everything that touch the volunteers. And when we do this submission, we have a platform in Brazil. It's called Plataforma Brasil, where we put all the documents and then we send to the ethical committee. This ethical committee has 2 meetings per month, and they evaluate the document they receive to approve or not, or to request some more information or another document or something like this. It takes not more than 1 month, usually, when you have all the documents and all the information. But if you touch any of the special areas that we have, for example, indigenous population, DNA studies or genetic studies, medical device, also international study, we have different, usually are 8 topics. If we touch these areas, they are going to the CONEP. They will be evaluated by the National Ethical Committee in Brazil. And it takes more time because they have just 1 meeting per month. And if they receive a lot of requests for evaluation, it can take more time. They have reduced this time for evaluation. But for example, during the COVID period, all the COVID projects were prioritized because they were, they
Public
were,
health concern.
yeah. So
Prioritize public. Yeah.
all the other studies were on hold on because we could not also do any studies during this period. But it's work a lot when we have, and it's go with the protects of the rights and the well-being of the participants, and we use the GCP and all the international regulation to create this evaluation. Just to point, the 8 areas are genetics, I think reproductive, human reproduction and embryos, indigenous population, and you have products or device, if you have a new equipment, if you have also international cooperation, biobanks also, you need to go to them.
Got it. That makes sense. So that's interesting. You're saying that, so in the United States, for example, you have institutional IRBs, right? These institutional review boards, which may exist at a university, right? You can also have private companies which act as central IRBs, right? But what you're saying is that in Brazil, there aren't really private IRBs, so to speak. Everything is handled either by a local IRB, the CEP, or a federal IRB, CONEP, and that's all a public managed service. Is that correct?
Yeah, but the IRB, the CEP is usually linked to a hospital. Usually it's not common that my institute evaluates my own project because we have a conflict of interest. But so sometimes you can send to another, you can choose, you can ask CONEP, oh, please evaluate this in another CEP, other committee than this one. Because sometimes we have a lot. It's not interesting to have for example, in my CRO, to have a CEP because there is a conflict of interest. So it's very interesting if you send to another CEP because the rules are the same, Sometimes if they do not understand what methodology you are using, it's also important how you explain this. For the ICF, we have a lot of rules that I think they are common in other countries, because in Brazil we need not just explain, but we need to explain clear with different words, and the protocol for the ICF needs to be for the human images rights also, because today we have a lot in marketing for cosmetics. We need to understand, because sometimes the client can ask and the industry can ask, no, I want to have your image or your photo until 2 or 3 generations. And sometimes it cannot pass by the ethical committee, because you don't know how they are going to use the image. So we need to understand in each kind of clinical research to see how we can reduce the impact in the ethical committee, because today we have the artificial intelligence. So the AI is something new. If you put this in a protocol, if you're having a new methodology, it can be triggered, and it can be something that will not approve, but they will ask more information. But it's something, when we work with something well established, they don't have any problem to approve. They are really, that's one of the difference when we talk about cosmetics and pharmaceutical drugs.
It's really, really interesting to hear this. I don't know if you can fully appreciate this, because I'm coming from the other side of the fence here, but I cannot believe that there is a universal IRB system that everyone can use, that a bunch of hospitals have joined and actually works at the federal level. That sounds like magic for the industry. I'm actually shocked.
Yes,
but
I invite you to check this site, the website, Plataforma Brasil. It's really nice because we can have this access. I can have an access like as a research. Someone can have an access like as a research analyst, because sometimes all the documents they put together there. And also interesting because we don't need to sign the protocol when we submit, because the platform will generate a cover page where all the sponsor with clinical research involved, the PI will sign. And then when we sign, we explain that we are okay with all the documents we sent. It's interesting because when we do this, sometimes we have some clients in different countries that do not understand how it works. So if you can visit, I can invite you to see. It's a platform that really works. I don't know in USA how you do this. When we send in USA, you send by email? I don't know. You have a platform?
There are a lot of different ways that this can be handled, but there's nothing that's managed on the federal level that works on both the local and the federal level. So that's wild to me. Is Plataforma Brazil run by the government? Is it run by like the National Health Institute?
Yes. It was really something that changed a lot our way of work in Brazil for clinical research. It helped a lot. So I think it can be implemented in different countries. I think it will help because for us to see the status of a protocol that has been evaluated, that has been re-evaluated, it's something that we do online. So not just me, but the sponsor, all the parts involved can have access and to see, because it's clear. And when the protocol is not approved, you can access the document that in all the information why they do not approve it and which information they need to have before the approval. So it makes the process more clear.
Yeah, that level of efficiency is just amazing. I urge everyone to check it out. I myself will do it as well. So Alessandro, this has been amazing to talk to you about some of the unique areas of Brazilian clinical research. Is there anything that you'd like the viewers to know or talk about yourself for the next couple?
Yes, there is a point that we have discussed, because now that when I started in science, I was just looking for trying to produce more information and trying to contribute to the scientific field not in Brazil, but in the world. And when I changed it for business, this changing was something at the beginning. I was, how can I do this? Because now I'm more commercial. I need to sell the Brazilian population, the Brazilian region, to do some studies. But I'm also someone in science. So at the beginning, there was a conflict in my mind that was comparing. Is that okay to do this? And how can I do this? And then I understood that when we do scientific research and then we pass to commercial, we can do this better because we know how to do the clinical research. We know all these details that can change a lot the way of doing research. For example, if you want to do a new cosmetic, for example, you need to understand that cosmetic, the life that they just takes 1 year of producing and selling. And then they need to improve with innovative formula, with innovative effects. So we need to sell more innovative methodology. So for this, my background in science can help to understand how can I see an anti-aging effect if I have this kind of formulation. So which kind of, for example, in cosmetics here in Brazil, in Rio, for example, we have a lot of requests for SPF. But how can I do a real exposure? Because we have different kind of exposure for photobiology, we have lights that simulates, but in real life, it's not like this. We need to understand the population that takes the product and go to the beach. We don't have here, maybe in your region, in Europe, but here we are not usual users. We are occasionally. If we go to the beach, we are going to use. If we know we are going to be exposed, okay. But all during the week, we don't use. Today, it has been changed because there is a lot of makeup that has a cover and a SPF, including the formula. But when we know that this population and this market needs to be renewed in 1 year, we understand that this study needs to be innovative. We need to propose, to understand how the skin will react to this formula. So the background of science can help us. So I invite also all the fellows in science to understand that we are not just academics. We can do more if we want, yes. But it's something, it was a challenge at the beginning, but now I'm really liking to use my background, my understanding of clinical research, of preclinical research, because sometimes we need to understand the results that we have at the beginning that allow us to do clinical research with the same formula, and then to take all this information together and to do a dossier, a document that will go to FDA, Anvisa, EMA. It's something that take our knowledge in science and will help us to understand the need of the regulatory system for approving this use of this drug. I'm really happy that my transition into clinical operations and commercial has been something that I know that because there is a lot of people that request me, I'm in academic, so how can I do to transition it, to go to the business area, to the industry, the pharmaceutical industry? Because it's something that is really growing in Brazil, and we don't have a formation, a graduation for this. Now, for example, I'm doing an MBA in business and trying to link the scientific background to this point of need of anyone that works for industry is really interesting, because when we do clinical operation, we work with people. Even this is for a clinical research or a clinical coordinator, a manager, or communication, or management for recruitment. We take all this information together and we can build an interesting CV or curriculum to have a big opportunity to increase the efficiency of being scientific research and also business commercial development.
Awesome. And if a viewer wants to get in touch, how might they find you?
I think the most common is LinkedIn. They can find me, Alessandro. I'm not sure if it's Alessandro Rodrigues do Nascimento or Alessandro Nascimento.
Don't worry, I'll make sure to put it in the show notes. All right, well, with that being said, Alessandro, thank you so much for contributing your time today. Everyone, please check out Alessandro's LinkedIn. Please consider running clinical research trials in Brazil, and please definitely check out the Platforma Brazil.
Yes,
because
but
that is
from Brazil.
super interesting, and I am very eager to see that. All right, thank you so much, Alessandro.
Alice, it was a pleasure. Thank you. I know that you are starting this project. I saw some other interviews. So I really understand now that we need to use these tools, these digital tools to develop this linked with the population, because I know that the population can access all this information. Because sometimes you are really restricted to the scientific field and the fellows in science in the university. But now I think it's important because we have a lot of access to the information that we cannot be sure that they are real or are fake. So if we use this opportunity like you are doing to reduce the distance between the population and the academic field, it will be really nice for us to do this now because we really need this. So thank you for this opportunity. And please be okay to contact me, anyone, no problem, in Brazil and in other countries.
Okay, thank you. All right, bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you for tuning into today's episode of Trial and Error. Remember, every step forward in clinical research brings us closer to the next medical breakthrough. Our goal is to spread knowledge and improve the chance that life-saving drugs make it to market. If you found this valuable, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcast, Spotify, or your favorite podcast app. Also, please consider rating us or giving us a review, as that really helps other listeners find the podcast. Most importantly, though, I'd love to hear from you. Please feel free to reach out directly and say hello.